So Tatsuya, it's a pleasure to have you for our Meet the Maker series. It's one of our most requested, and I guess the first question really is, how did you get into engineering and electronics? I mean, where did your journey start?
I guess, well, I've always been into kind of taking things apart and not being able to put them together and, getting told off by my parents and stuff. So I was always fascinated by the way things work, which is, I think, same story for a lot of other engineers. But I was specifically into audio stuff, so I started making speakers and amps and taking guitar amps apart and kind of changing the sound and stuff. But I only got into synthesis, so maybe, I started doing that when I was about 10 or 11 or something. But I only got into synthesis when I was maybe like 15 or 16, when I built my first oscillator. And that was amazing because, you weren't just like changing sound. Before that, I was just only, working with kind of playback and like audio stuff. But then I had my first oscillator and I was like, yeah, you can actually create the sound from nothing,
What was it that kind of drew you to that, I guess? I mean, was there a sort of reason where you wanted to generate rather than modify?
I don't know. I've just been always into kind of getting into, the circuit's all about currents and voltages and that manifesting itself as something else is really cool. It could have been light, it could have been like visuals or, but sound somehow seemed more interesting to me. It's just the way I found it, And so, which is why we have an oscilloscope on the Minilog actually, because it's just so good to see circuits and signals manifesting themselves in different ways.
Yeah, there's a sort of connection there, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so.
So, I mean, are you self-taught then? I mean, is that how you got here? I mean,
I was at the time. So, yeah, after building my first oscillator, I got into, building this step sequencer, 8 oscillator. It was a really weird synth. It had an oscillator per step, and you could vary the lengths of each oscillator, each step actually. So you could create kind of complex kind of layering of sounds. So then, yeah, that took me kind of deeper into the logic behind sequencing, as well as the synthesis itself. But it wasn't until university, where I did an engineering degree, that I was kind of properly schooled in design.
And can you specialise in audio circuitry and audio engineering, or do you have to learn all the other stuff too?
It's weird. Well, the course I took was like general engineering. Where I went, they don't have specific engineering courses, so I had to do structural engineering and all the mechanics and other stuff apart from kind of hardware design, bit of software as well. So, but then you get specialised in the later years, and my master's was on differential pairs and distortion mechanisms.
That's way above my head there. But, so when you were actually studying, were you still sort of building your own personal projects, or was it mostly kind of coursework? I get because they're working pretty hard, right?
Yeah. No, it was a lot of work, but quite long holidays as well, which is why I got some time to build my own stuff.
And so, I mean, from there, what happened when you finished up? Did you start working in audio straight away, or were you kind of?
I had a bar job actually.
Like many of us.
Yeah. So I finished my masters. I was 22 or 23, and I went back down to London. And yeah, I was working in a bar in the East End for a year, while building stuff as well. So that was my little kind of, little bit of freedom I had after uni. I had a bit of money so I could buy components, buy tools and build stuff. Had time to build stuff. Then it kind of dawned on me that I should get a proper job, and so I took a flight to Japan, got an interview with Korg. And yeah,
wow,
got in.
That straightforward, just kind of.
Yeah, kind of. There's a weird system of how you're meant to get a job in Japan, and I didn't know any of it, so I just called them up, and they were like, "Yeah, send in your details." And
so, did you have to take in some of your equipment and go, "Hey, look what I built," or was it more kind of just?
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I had means of knowing what they, what the application process was. So I just took that synth, the 8 oscillator synth, and showed it to them. And I think it was like 2 weeks later, I joined the company and started designing. So
it's funny,
cool.
isn't it? It's almost like it's like getting a record deal in that sort of sense. I mean, for you, I guess having that kind of job and then being let loose to kind of, because it seems to me you've had quite a lot of freedom in the kind of where you've been able to roam.
Yeah. So I mean, it's Korg. I didn't apply to any of the other companies, by the way. I just wanted to go to Korg, and that was because I really liked the products that were coming out of Korg, and I wanted to be a part of it. And when I joined the company culture was such that if you had something you really wanted to do, then you would be respected for that, even if you're like a new guy. You get
that seems like quite a modern and forward-thinking process. I mean, from what I understand of Japanese company culture, it's kind of
it's very strong hierarchy.
So they encourage that kind of follow you. Isn't it Google? They have that kind of you get 1 day a week or a week a month to kind of follow some other project, and it yields all sorts of great stuff. And it's that similar kind of idea.
Yeah, well, it's not that structured actually. You're not assigned like a particular day or a particular amount of time to do to do your own thing, but somehow you kind of get to do it, and if it's good, it'll become a project and more people get involved, and
So I mean, I guess also, I mean, what was your first product with Korg then? Was it the
My first one was I think the Micro Korg XL, but when I joined the company, that was already kind of half done. So I kind of like jumped into there to kind of, get to grips with mass production design. And it was only after that I started doing my own thing, and we started with the Monotron, which was like my first, proper my synth,
But that must have been amazing, the buzz, because that caused a massive stir, because it was the first, wasn't it, really?
It was the first analog synth from Korg in like 30 years or something, 30-something years,
So when those pre-orders come in and you just think, and the press, and you're seeing it blow up like that, is that that must be a great feeling, to have that kind of, hey, that was me, cool.
No, I was really, it was really exciting. It was very kind of, probably one of my most kind of personal projects, I guess. And it was cool because I didn't know anything about the industry. I didn't know how, I didn't know, how to do your own project inside the company, as well as like how to kind of project it towards like a worldwide audience. But so it was like, really personal because, I got to learn so many things from that tiny synth.
I guess one of the big things for any engineer is, because ideas, people can go a lot of places with ideas, but then you have to introduce that kind of whole nature of commerciality and viability and all those things. I mean, that sounds like a pretty steep learning curve as well, I guess.
But also, the company culture isn't just about numbers, and I think that's one of the reasons why, we get the kind of freedom that we do to create our own stuff. If we were just following numbers, we would just be doing market research, targeting, a particular kind of market, and it gets less interesting when that happens. So I think the challenge now, the Monotron was pretty much under the radar. We just kind of put it out and surprise people, and but now we have to be careful not to just like go into a market and say, making like business decisions rather than creative ones.
And I guess the thing is what you've obviously figured out is a way to make analog voices viable in terms of cost of product and the final price. So I mean, but that can be modified and modified. I mean, I guess the thing is when you're working with, say, just purely DSP, you tend to want to reuse the IP that's in all of that code, whereas you've got more freedom in the analog world, I guess, right?
I mean, like as an engineer, it's boring just to like, just to throw in a circuit that's been done before. And different synths need different sounding voices, so it's good to redesign them.
I'm also curious about when you create a synthesizer. I don't know that many people maybe realise that the features don't necessarily mean it sounds a certain way. There's an amount of voicing within the synthesizer to give it a specific characteristic. Are you involved in that process heavily as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of the most, most difficult, but also the most enjoyable part of designing an analog synth. Little things like, the charging capacitor on the VCO, how you discharge it will affect the way a raw saw wave will sound, for example. Just open everything up, open the filter up, no modulation, and you just hear a saw wave, and they will sound different depending on what kind of circuit you put together. So that's really interesting stuff.
Are you ever tempted to open up that level of tweakability to the end user as well, or do you incorporate some of that into the design anyway, so that a knob will do some of those voicing?
That's a possibility, but it's really kind of minute changes in the sound that I'm talking about.
Right.
That in general, it's better if you kind of go in and find the right sound, and then do the normal kind of modulation, filtering.
So I guess also, do you find? You're an engineer, but do you find that you're involved in the software side of things as well? Because as we know, there's a lot of software in control, even of analog electronics, and I guess the sequencer, all that side of things. Do you get into that as well?
I don't do any coding myself, but I've been working with the same software engineer since the Monotron, actually, because the Monotron Duo had a bit of software in it. We just go into just loads of detail on how the sequencer should work. Even little things like how the menu structure should be, and things like that.
Yeah, I guess that affects the GUI stuff.
Yeah.
So, last question then is where do you see things going? Do you think that the large-scale manufacture and the miniaturization of components will see sort of more extreme analog circuitry coming to the fore, or how do you see things moving?
I think that, well, one thing that we've seen in the last few years is the rise of ARM core processors, and that's really helped us, Korg, build a lot of the analog synths that we have, because they control all the analog circuitry, and we get a lot of processing power, for the cost. So advances in technology will, I think, steer the way we're going. So I don't know, maybe programmable analog logic chips, or if something pops up, I'm happy to kind of jump onto it and try it out.
I guess that's the thing, when you hear of stuff and I guess it's like application engineers, isn't it, where you see a component and think, ooh, that could actually make a really big difference.
Yeah. But in terms of synths, I think analog's not just a hype anymore. I think it's here to stay. So it will change form, but hopefully we'll be finding more exciting stuff to come up with in the future.
Thank you very much for your time.